Reflections on the Good News of Jesus Christ for Palm Sunday, the Sunday of the Lord's Passion, from the Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus was arraigned before the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, who questioned him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus responded, "As you say." Yet when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he had made no reply. Then Pilate said to him, "Surely you hear the many charges they bring against you." He did not answer him on a single count, much to the governor's surprise. Now, on the occasion of a festival, the governor was accustomed to release one prisoner whom the crowd would designate. They had at the time a notorious prisoner named Barabbas. Since they were already assembled, Pilate said to them, "Which one do you wish me to release for you, Barabbas or Jesus, the so-called Messiah?" He knew, of course, that it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. While he was still presiding on the bench, his wife sent him a message. "Do not interfere in the case of that holy man. I had a dream about him today which has greatly upset me." Meanwhile, the chief priests and elders convinced the crowds that they should ask for Barabbas and have Jesus put to death. So, when the governor asked them, "Which one do you wish me to release for you?" they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what am I to do with Jesus, the so-called Messiah?" "Crucify him," they all cried. He said, "Why? What crime has he committed?" But they only shouted the louder, "Crucify him." Pilate finally realized that he was making no impression and that a riot was breaking out instead. He called for water and washed his hands in front of the crowd, declaring as he did so, "I am innocent of the blood of this just man. The responsibility is yours." The whole people said in reply, "Let his blood be on us and on our children." At that, he released Barabbas to them. Jesus, however, he first had scourged, and then he handed him over to be crucified. The governor's soldiers took Jesus inside the praetorium and collected the whole court around him. They stripped off his clothes and wrapped him in a scarlet military cloak. Weaving a crown of thorns, they fixed it on his head and stuck a reed in his right hand. Then they began to mock him by dropping to their knees before him, saying, "All hail, King of the Jews." They also spat at him. Afterward, they took hold of the reed and kept striking him on the head. Finally, when they had finished making a fool of him, they stripped him of the cloak, dressed him in his own clothes, and led him off to crucifixion. On their way out, they met a Cyrenian named Simon. This man they pressed into service to carry the cross. Upon arriving at a site called Golgotha, a name which means skull place, they gave him a drink of wine flavored with gall, which he tasted but refused to drink. When they had crucified him, they divided his clothes among them by casting lots. Then they sat down there and kept watch over him. Above his head, they had put the charge against him in writing, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." Two insurgents were crucified along with him, one at his right and one at his left. People going by kept insulting him, tossing their heads and saying, "So you are the one who was going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days? Save yourself, why don't you? Come down off that cross, if you are God's son." down off that cross. The chief priests, the scribes, and the elders all joined in the jeering. He saved others, but he cannot save himself. So he's the king of Israel? Let's see him come down from that cross, and then we will believe. He relied on God. Let God rescue him now, if he wants to. After all, he claimed, I am God's son. The insurgents who had been crucified with him kept taunting him in the same way. From noon onward there was darkness over the whole land until mid-afternoon. Then, toward mid-afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud tone, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you abandoned me? This made some of the bystanders who heard it remark, he is invoking Elijah. Immediately, one of them ran off and got a sponge. He soaked it in cheap wine and, sticking it on a reed, tried to make him drink. Meanwhile, the rest said, leave him alone. Let's see whether Elijah comes to his rescue. Once again, Jesus cried out in a loud voice and then gave up his spirit. Suddenly, the curtain of the sanctuary was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth quaked, boulders split, tombs opened. Many bodies of saints who had fallen asleep were raised. After Jesus' resurrection, they came forth from their tombs and entered the holy city and appeared to many. The centurion and his men who were keeping watch over Jesus were terror-stricken at seeing the earthquake and all that was happening, and said, clearly, this was the Son of God. The Gospel of the Lord. An old story, one we've heard many times, perhaps like an early version of the Oberammergau Passion Play for us to watch and observe, complete with the predictable tugs on our emotions at the appropriate moments. But what if we were to take the risk of seeing if we might recognize ourselves in one of the characters? What might the story say to us then? Perhaps you are Jesus, who might well have ridden the donkey into Jerusalem because he was tired of the demands his ministry made on him, tired of the lack of understanding on the part of the people, or for that matter, on the part of the apostles, tired of having his hopes dashed time after time. Perhaps you are one of the apostles, who seemed to have their minds set on establishing a kingdom in which they would have power and importance and recognition, a kingdom in which all the problems would have quick and easy solutions, in which all their dreams would come true. Perhaps you are Peter, who was full of enthusiasm, admiration, even love for Jesus, who felt strong in his faith and firm in his commitment to the Lord, but who had yet to learn the full extent of his own frailty, weakness, and sinfulness. Peter, who did not yet know how much he needed Jesus. Perhaps you are Judas, who started out with good intentions, I'm sure, but whose pride got the better of him, to the point that he knew how to handle things better than Jesus did. Judas, who let his own goals and ambitions become more important than Jesus' message, who forgot all he had heard Jesus say about forgiveness, and ended up broken, embittered, and destroyed because of his own pride. Perhaps you are one of the high priests, who only wanted what seemed best, but whose passion for keeping order and control prevented them from remembering that God always breaks into our lives in ways that are surprising, that God continually disrupts our plans and expectations because God's hopes for us are so much greater than anything we have yet dreamed of. Perhaps your Pilate, who also was concerned about order and control and looking good in the eyes of others, particularly his superiors in Rome, who frankly could not have cared less one way or the other about Jesus and his message, but whose chief interest in life lay in the next promotion, the next step on his career ladder, and so was willing to dispose of Jesus so that his own ambitions would not be threatened. Perhaps you are one of the nameless, faceless members of the crowd, good, ordinary people trying to live their lives in the best way they knew how, perhaps attracted to Jesus, yes, but not yet committed to him, not yet willing to change their lives in keeping with his message, and so finding it easier simply to go along with what everyone else was doing, rather than run the risk of being different, following their head rather than their heart. Who are you in this story? My brothers and sisters, perhaps you and I are among the many people who have been taught to watch from the sidelines, feeling sorry for Jesus, yes, but perhaps also secretly thankful that because Jesus did all this suffering and dying for me, I don't have to. But then along comes life, hitting us with the suffering and dying that accompanies sickness, or economic upheaval, or the loss of reputation, or the death of a relationship, or any number of other crises. Moments that might make us turn to God and cry out, "Why me? I'm one of the good guys. I go to church. I say my prayers. I do good deeds for others. It's not fair. This isn't supposed to happen to me." This shouldn't have happened to Jesus either. Brothers and sisters, Jesus did not endure all this suffering and dying so that we do not have to. He did all of this to show us how to endure all of our own experiences of suffering and dying, however they happen through life, so that those experiences do not lead us into anger, bitterness, seeking revenge. On the cross, Jesus was humiliated, shamed, brutalized. That pain stretched his heart to a great depth. But that new space did not become filled with bitterness and anger. Rather, it became filled with a depth of empathy and forgiveness beyond our ability to understand. And now we know why Jesus never says, "Worship me," although we wish he had, because then I could come to church, spend my hour or so worshiping Jesus, and then be free to go on my way and live life the rest of the week just as I choose. But that's not how it is. What Jesus does say again and again is, "Follow me." Follow me all the way through suffering and dying, all the way to resurrection. I'll show you how to do it. Just follow me. And how does Jesus do it? Even when he is feeling abandoned on the cross? He does it by clinging to the trust he has in the Father. Even then, in the midst of darkness and death. Such trust makes no sense to Jesus or to us. But then, making sense is something done in the mind. Trust, especially this trust, does not come from the mind. Trust for Jesus and for us comes from the heart. He trusted anyway. And that's how we are to do it, by following him. And that is also how we, like Jesus, will finally escape death. It does not have the last word. You see, the tomb is empty. The Father is waiting to welcome us home. If you would like to read the Passion narrative in its entirety, you will find it in all four of the Gospels. Today's reading is from chapters 26 and 27 of the Gospel according to Matthew. Thanks for listening. Please do share this with someone else that you may know who might enjoy listening to it. And consider subscribing to this weekly Gospel reflection. No cost, no obligation. You can do that at our website, www.justanother.disciple.com. Once again, www.justanother.disciple.com. May you have a sacred, holy week.